With your permission, I'd like to spin a little further.
You may not. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cinema Psych Podcast, the podcast where film meets psychology. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and today we are going to do something a little different. This episode is going to be a dual episode. We're going to talk about two films, as the title suggests. We're going to talk about the 1950s classic Akira Kurosawa film, Rashomon. And to sort of wet our whistle just a little bit, we are going to complement that, we'll say, with a pairing of the recent whodunit, which I think is an exquisite film. We're going to be talking about really exquisite films today, but Rian Johnson's Knives Out. So they both have really similar premises with respect to all of the memory stuff. And so, we're going to compare 1950 to 2019, almost a 70-year span of time. But Rashomon really brings to the fore some great filmmaking techniques and a great exploration of motivation and memory. And then, of course, the classic whodunit caper is well known for the kind of fodder that this genre brings. So we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna have some fun talking about Rashomon and Knives Out. Before we jump into it, I wanted to mention that we're probably gonna spoil the end of Knives Out. There's no real end to spoil for Rashomon. Akira Kurosawa leaves the end fairly interpretable. But there's definitely a ruining of the end. So if you don't want to get the end ruined for you, well, I suggest pausing the podcast now, going and watching Knives Out, and then coming back. Now, if you're like, whodunits, I like the journey getting there rather than the mystery of it, which, by the way, is really fun, the journey that gets you to the end. But if that's what you like about whodunits, well, then stick around, listen, we'll tell you, we'll basically tell you at the beginning what happens at the end. So stick around. Thanks for coming. My guest host today is Dr. Celeste Pilegard. Celeste is an assistant teaching professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of California, San Diego. She studies cognitive and educational psychology, sort of how learning works and how to design instruction to facilitate processes of learning. Celeste, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. I am super glad to have you on. We were office mates all throughout grad school, like 5 years. We made our office look really nice in that last year, and then it's probably gone to hell in a handbasket after.
Oh gosh, can you imagine?
Yeah, the horror. Anyways, you got to stay in California, and I left when we graduated. Fast forward 4 years later, holy crap.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wild, right? It's wild.
Yeah. California is misses you very much.
I know. Oh man.
But it's lovely to get a little Skype action in.
Yeah, every once in a while, you know.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about some films today related to our experiences in grad school, which was all about cognitive psychology. I mean, we pretty much did everything in like sync. Did the lab meetings with
Yep.
our advisors, office mates, as I said, and we graduated at the same time. It's like
we studied for quals at the same time.
We studied for quals. Oh my god! And then like we took them a few weeks apart. I think.
I feel like that's the closest we ever were. Just really in the trenches.
Just the horror of it, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're gonna chat about a couple of movies. Rashomon, which you know is the early contender for like one of the most amazing memory films out there, in my opinion, of course. And then we're gonna kind of like flip that script and apply some of those concepts to Knives Out, which came out last year. It's actually, I think, still in theaters.
That seems possible. Yeah.
I might be mistaken, although I did.
We're on the cutting edge, Alex.
Yeah, it's true. I did watch it on DVD, but maybe I don't know.
Oh.
I could be wrong. I'm out of touch sometimes, but that's okay.
Sure.
But hey, we're gonna do cutting edge, and literally because it's Knives Out, so pun intended, everyone.
Ooh, very nice transition.
Thank you. So, as I ask my guest hosts when they come on about the films that we're gonna discuss, what about your research and what about your teaching can generally apply to these films, or maybe just films in general?
Sure. So I study learning, as you said. I study how to design instruction, and I think that the most striking thing when you start looking into what helps people learn, there are all of these like folk theories about whether you're a visual learner or a verbal learner, and
learning styles.
All of that nonsense, yeah. And just all of these like small things around the margins that affect learning. But the lion's share of the variance in, if you have two people in a classroom and they both get the same lesson and one leaves having learned a lot and one leaves having learned very little, the thing that probably makes up the biggest difference between the two of them is that one has a lot of relevant prior knowledge and the other doesn't have the relevant prior knowledge that they need.
Right.
And so, I study, I say I'm like a learning researcher, but it's also studying memory at the same time.
Sure.
And so, these aren't like pedagogical films or anything, but they really emphasize the way that memory can differ between and among people. In this case, we can talk about, it's more than just prior knowledge going on here. Obviously, this is not just like somebody sat in on an engineering lecture and they couldn't remember any of it because they hadn't taken the prereq. There are obviously some layers here.
Don't get me started about prereqs. Oh God.
Oh gosh.
Anyways.
But yeah, so we learn by these like this particular set of mechanics that are quite similar among everybody. It's not true that some people are visual learners and some people are verbal learners.
Right.
But where this difference comes in is that we're all bringing different sets of knowledge into any given situation, and it vastly changes the way that we process any new information that we have. And I think that's represented in really interesting ways in these particular films.
I agree, and we're gonna get into the nitty gritty on that for sure. But so let's broaden this out to film in general. So my question then would be, what do you love about film, and do you have the opportunity to combine film and psych in your teaching, and what sorts of things, if you were or do, would you want students, other film enthusiasts to know about the two?
Yeah, so I have, knowing that I was going to be on this podcast. I've been thinking about this a lot, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I love film, and I feel like there's a lot that film has contributed to my understanding of a lot of psychological phenomena.
Cool.
I mean, I'm gonna. Yeah, where this is going is for me to say I fully do not use film in my teaching.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop this podcast immediately.
Yeah, right, but it was lovely to catch up.
How dare you?
Here's my problem. I'm on the quarter system and we have 10 weeks of class and each session is 50 minutes long. And I have not figured out how to, when I took cognitive psychology, we watched Memento across 2 class periods because we were on the semester system and we had time to kill.
That's how you do it.
Yeah, and I don't have that affordance anymore. But I guess to get back to what I love about film. So something that I think is really really special about just fiction in general, art in general, and then film can really create this immersive experience that some other media can't. But is this way that you can kind of capture what it's like to experience something that I think in psychology, I can tell you all day about these different memory phenomena, and I can tell you about, patients who have different memory disorders or different perceptual disorders, and you can say, oh gosh, it's so fascinating that there's such a range of experiences that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
But what film can do really well is try to create that, try to say like, hey, I don't know what it's like to be you, but like, here's what it's like to be me. You can kind of create this to give this sense. And so Memento is the, what's a pièce de résistance? Is this a pièce de résistance? I don't speak any French.
Yeah, we can call it the pièce de résistance.
Sure.
It's great.
It's impossible to say. So Memento, it's this remarkable piece in terms of you can learn all of this stuff about anterograde amnesia, but Memento really tries to capture like what maybe it could feel like, and we don't know. I can't tell you what it's like to be in my head, but Memento is a really interesting hypothesis about what that might be like. And I think that this is something that a lot of my favorite movies kind of do. And so some of the movies that I've seen relatively recently that I think do this really well, where you're kind of distilling some aspect of a lived experience are, so part of the examples I was thinking of, like Anomalisa, which is this really wild Charlie Kaufman movie that captures something about depression that I think is really it's not that it's teaching you about depression. It's capturing through storytelling and through this very weird movie with puppets what depression kind of could be like. Or The Lobster is one that like I think captures something about loneliness, and the kind of like the difficulty of being like a single person in a world where that's not supposed to be the thing that you're supposed to be.
Yes.
Midsummer was the last one, the most recent one of these that I saw, where Midsummer is very much about this like internal experience of feeling like nobody sees you, or Get Out, which kind of captures, through this like science fiction story, just like how frustrating and terrifying and stupid it is to have to live in a world where like your fate is determined by people's dumb racist ideas. And so so all of these were like, it's not like you're not going in to watch a lecture or something, but you leave with some feeling of what maybe it's like to live in somebody else's brain for a little while. And I think that that's something that is so cool because like we know as cognitive psychologists, like we can't simulate having a mind other than our own. We have the one that we're in. And so I feel like art is a place that we can kind of explore what it might be like a little bit to be somebody other than ourselves.
I fully co-sign on that idea. I love it. And to hear it articulated by you is actually pretty wonderful, because I've had those feelings too, but I don't know if I could really articulate it beyond maybe talking about the essence of the film, like going into like a sort of a film digest, as opposed to what I'm hearing, like almost like an experience or a person digest within that film setting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Have you seen Midsummer?
No, I haven't. But
oh man, I think that Midsummer got me thinking about this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Midsummer is one where it's so like visceral, the feeling that it gives you watching it, that it kind of got me thinking about the way that film can do this. So highly recommended. Very, very fine film. I think you'd love it.
Okay.
But yeah,
I think it's on streaming. I think it's somewhere.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. So the just to say, I don't use a lot of film in class. Sometimes I'll try to make cultural references, but it's hard because like I have a lot of international students and just students who, I am increasingly further and further away in age from my students. And so just making assumptions about any kind of cultural touchstone, sometimes I will throw something out and just the crickets in the room make me feel so old. And so I like, when there's an opportunity to bring something in, like, a piece of art or a poem or something like that, sometimes there'll be something that can capture a little bit of, look how, when we're talking about perception in class, look how this, artist noticed this thing long before any scientists were talking about it.
Right.
But it's, it takes a little less time to show a painting than it does to show a film.
That's very true. Although I just got a comment from a mid-semester feedback that I need to explain images more or something like that.
Okay.
And I thought it was odd. In sensation and perception. I don't know.
Do you know what kind of images they're talking about?
I don't know. It was strange, but
love constructive feedback with no details.
These things of 1,000 words. Please explain them more.
Right. 1,000 isn't that many words. That's like 4 pages, double spaced.
God, yeah, that is true. Oh man. Okay, well, these are all great points, but you have a larger point to make regarding Rashomon and Knives Out. Details on this choice?
Oh, what made me want to
Yes.
talk about this film particularly?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I So when you were asking me what film might be that I was interested in, Rashomon is one of those that's like, as you say, it's in the canon of memory and film that like, I mean, a lot of films are about memories. Citizen Kane is about memories, but like Rashomon is about memory. Rashomon has like a theory of memory, like a testable theory of memory.
Yes, and I don't think it gets as much, we'll say brain time in the United States because it's a Japanese film. It's a foreign language film, so it requires subtitles if you're going to show it in an English speaking classroom, and so maybe it gets passed over sometimes because
I don't know.
of that.
Now that Bong Joon-ho has told us all that we need to start watching more movies with subtitles, I think it's going to really change. Really going to change the zeitgeist. Did you see
we'll
Parasite?
see. I mean, I have my hopes. Because foreign language films are amazing.
Right.
There are some that like just fly under the radar. And this one almost did. But luckily it won in Cannes, I think. I don't remember exactly when, but it almost didn't get any recognition back in the 1950s. I
mean, I think it ended up winning the Best Foreign Film Oscar, but maybe it was only because it had film festival success. I see.
Yeah, it didn't. It did not make it. It would not have made it to the United States had it not passed the film festival test.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So Rashomon immediately, when I'm thinking of like, okay, what movies could I possibly comment on? But then I thought that it might be more fun to do something that came out a little bit more recent, and trying to think of what of the recent movies that I've seen would I have something to say about in terms of psychology. And I loved Knives Out so very much.
It was very good.
I'm so glad that you liked it. It is such a fun movie. It is good in almost every way I think a movie can be good. I absolutely loved it. But it also, I think I feel like it speaks directly to Rashomon in a lot of ways, and like it's clearly like there's clear influence there. But there's also, I think, there are, it's doing some of the same things. They're both whodunits. I feel silly to call Rashomon a whodunit. Knives Out Knives Out is like overtly a whodunit. Rashomon is like technically that is kind of the question, kind of a question.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And they both take this question of like, how can you find out the truth of something that happened in the past when the only evidence that you have is people's testimony? How can you how can you access the truth of a situation? When I was talking about like what I like about art in the classroom and what I like about art in terms of informing psychology, and I think that, like, I only saw Rashomon the first time in the last year, and it was just kind of fascinating to see this movie that came out in 1950, so long before cognitive psychologists had figured out most things that we know now about memory. It was such a new field. I mean, cognitive psychology the term hadn't been coined yet, and there's just like, it kind of exemplifies for me that cognitive psychologists are interested in a certain set of questions, but it's not new that we're interested in these questions, that humans are interested in these questions. It's just new that we're asking these questions with a particular set of tools. But sometimes, you can look back in art and you can see people capturing this thing. And with Rashomon, we're seeing these memory phenomena. And you can see this elsewhere too. You can see this in literature and in art, where you can see like, oh, 100 or 200 years before anybody had figured out this thing about perception in any kind of rigorous scientific way, people were still noticing that that's how they experience the world and representing it that way. Right. And I love that very much.
Yeah, it's good. And yes, I did love Knives Out. And I was waiting for it to come out on video to watch it, but as soon as you mentioned it, I'm like, well, hell yeah, it's coming out on video in just a couple of weeks. So yeah, we can totally do this. And I'm trying new things every episode for this year and for this year, but just like as the podcast continues, and doing 2 films. This is the first time we've done 2 films.
A crossover episode.
Yeah, and it's great because the 2 films do just work very well with each other. It's not like we're talking about Awakenings, and which is a film about mental health, and then shoot, I don't know. This joke would have gone better if I had planned it.
Awakenings and 50 First Dates.
Sure.
Can we talk about 50 First Dates for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
I've never seen the film.
Well, that's a problem.
It's a problem because when I teach, I am asked about nothing more than I'm asked about 50 First Dates. That when I will talk about memory, and I'll talk about, I mean, not even before I talk about amnesia, get people raising their hands. Oh, is this like in 50 First Dates? And I'm almost certain that the answer is no. Like I'm almost like everything that I've gathered is that it is not a good portrayal of what it's trying to portray. No. It's a comedy, and it's using a device that is useful to be funny. Yes. But like I'm not really that interested in seeing it, but I feel like I am just going to have to at some point, just so I can explain to students exactly why. All right, fine.
Yeah, I think you need to do your due diligence on that one.
All right.
Yeah, just so you can definitively say no. The
Okay.
answer to your question. So is this like in
Can I
I'm
just
going to
have them
stop you
call
there.
you?
Is this like in 51st States? Just bite your tongue. Bite it.
Uh-huh. I'm just going to FaceTime you into the classroom and you can explain.
Okay. The answer is no. Okay,
Okay.
bye, Celeste. Jason Spiegelman wanted me to tell his class a few weeks ago about what was it? It was something, and he wanted me to. I couldn't get on the phone, but he wanted to like put me on speakerphone and just be like, "Here's I don't have time to tell you how wrong you are. Actually, it's gonna bother me." So yeah, it didn't work out, but I am free to do that.
Great.
I am also free. So yeah.
All right,
Okay,
I'm holding you to that.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's jump into chatting about the various psych aspects of the two movies, and I think it would be silly if we didn't talk about the named effect that comes from Rashomon. So the Rashomon effect. So I wrote it in our little notes document that the Rashomon effect is essentially the result of the terribleness, and yes, terribleness is a word, of eyewitness testimony. Because eyewitness testimony can be given in contradictory ways, and the criminal justice system's like, let's just keep using it. And so the Rashomon effect is like, well, viewer, which story is correct? Which story are you going to put your trust into? And then Heider, in his 1988 book, said that the bias in perception, so what you were talking about earlier with the prior knowledge that comes in it, and it changes the way we see the world, can change the memory, which to the person saying the things that happened, in recalling the story and recounting their perception of it, is plausible to them. And if it's plausible to them, it's probably plausible to the person asking them or the person viewing it. In the case of the film. And as far as I'm aware, no film prior to Rashomon really played with this. I don't think it was. I don't think it was part of like the filmmaking story bin, where filmmakers were grabbing stories to make films out of. Whether they were stage plays before or they were written stories, other adaptations. But this is a 100% original story, messing with the viewer's perception on which one to believe. A few scholars took that a little bit further, and a lot of people think that the last story is the true one. And this is how the formula then works for the Rashomon effect. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the Rashomon effect?
So in Rashomon, you have these, like, as you say, it's these multiple perspectives on the same event that differ in really meaningful ways in terms of culpability, and in some cases in terms of just the bare facts of the situation, and ending with this final version of the story from, is that the woodcutter that tells the last version?
The woodcutter, yeah.
The woodcutter. Which I think you're right, that we're supposed to assume is the more accurate version. But even then, I think don't we then see him do something kind of dishonest, or no? I can't remember the last scene.
The idea is that the baby is the final issue to be resolved. and it's ambiguous. So, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the film. The baby is only mentioned in the final story, the woodcutter story, and he ends up talking about how he found this baby and he took it into his family, and he says it's the samurais and the woman, the woman's baby. And with it found a really, really nice jewel, like necklace or something like that. Some jewelry that was potentially worth a lot of money. And so, it's ambiguous as to whether or not the baby's his, and he's just using that as a means to steal. Or that he's then basically stealing a baby and raising it as his own, which is part of the story that he weaves. He's like, this is not my baby, but I'm going to raise it as my own because I found it. Yeah. And it's like, was it not your baby to start with, man? Yeah. So,
So I think like this final moment to be like, look, even this guy's self-serving, you know? Yeah. So I think that, that Rashomon ends in this really despairing place about like just the unknowability of truth. That like that we can't trust anybody because everybody's biased. And I don't like in terms of the like eyewitness testimony of it all. It's unclear whether Kurosawa is saying that these people are literally remembering this story in different ways, or if they are telling it in self-serving ways, which I think is an important distinction.
Right, and I think he does a good job with the second or third story, which is the story of the dead samurai, right? Who participated in the act, all of the events that the bandit is on trial for, and so sprinkling that in through the voices of some, I don't know, mediums, I suppose is what they were, is a good way to sort of put his hand in front. He's like, I'm not saying that eyewitnesses are bad or good. They're there and they're part of it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that I think Rashomon has something really important to say there. It's taking a strong stance in terms of this is how you get an effect named after you. You don't get an effect named after you when you take a kind of middling stance in terms of like, well, the world is complex. It could be a lot of ways. Rashomon is taking the strong stance that like, how can you ever trust anybody's story when everybody is self-serving? And yes. I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of eyewitness memory research, and so there is so much there's so much research from the last many decades now,
50 some years.
Stuff since the 70s that's really important for this, and demonstrating the ways that memory is not a video camera. Memory is we're not just clicking play on our head on some perfect recording, and it's not just the problem isn't just that the film decays with time. The problem is that it is susceptible to really meaningful distortions.
Really meaningful distortions. So I can jump in with Bartlett's War of the Ghosts. So when you talk about expectation in remembering things and the cultural expectation that was in the first and foremost aspect of this really seminal study. So Bartlett had British Cambridge students read a Native American folktale, and details of that folktale have there was no changes to the story elements, and so they were all how the that particular tribe told that story. and details about literally fighting with ghosts and spirits, and then one of the main characters of the story dies at the end, and this black ooze is coming out of his mouth, and the ooze is important to this tribe's culture, and so Bartlett had the students retell the story immediately after reading it. It's fine. They got most of the details. And they had him come back a couple of weeks later, and they started omitting important parts of the story, and then changing the way that certain aspects of the story. Then he had to come back a month later. I don't know. I think he had them come back at like 3 different time intervals. But
he would have them read somebody else's recollection and then recall that recollection. So there's like a series of like, so it's like a game of telephone, because he was interested in errors and what amplifies errors better than a game of telephone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And then, by this time, by even like 3 months out, the details of the story were no longer resembling the Native American story. I think one important aspect of that black ooze that I just mentioned was replaced with, foaming at the mouth, which like 2 wildly different things. But, European Americans don't know about black ooze coming from one's mouth. And so, but they might be familiar with rabies, right? Which leads to like foaming of the mouth and, people dying in that way. And so these things were omitted. Things were changed, and that's because they were recollecting that through their lens, as you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So, you see like immediately, like the first recollection, everything about the spirit world goes away immediately, because these students don't have a schema for a war between, mortals and ghosts in the same realm. And so they retell it so that, okay, well, now it's just going to be a battle, and they're not trying to make errors. They're trying to remember it accurately. And you see, British college students, the folk tales that they would know would be like Robin Hood or King Arthur or something like that. Yeah. And so you also get people retelling it, and they're starting it with once upon a time, because they're turning it into the schema that they have in their folk tales. It starts with once upon a time. There's a clear sense of a hero who's on some kind of, righteous hero's journey, which is not the schema that is useful to accurately recall this folktale that comes from a completely different folktelling tradition. And so you see, there's in one of the retellings, the black thing that comes out of the mouth becomes the soul. So it suddenly becomes a much more Christian story. Right. So what you're finding is that the way that people are making errors it's again not decay. Maybe there's some. There are details that are lost. People forget the name of the bay where they are. But then also, it's these really non-random distortions that you're finding that people are kind of reorganizing the story around their expectations, around their schemas for a folktale. And so, it's not that they're like, oh, this is too weird and I'm going to make it into something else. It's just that it's literally how they're remembering it is in this distorted way.
And you can see that in the film by the bandits' perspective, and then the samurai through the medium's perspective on like who was the better warrior.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And so I think that that's an interesting thing about Rashomon is that are these people, one way to view this is that everybody has perfect memory of the events, but they are telling them in a way that, they sat down, they're like, you know what, that little battle in the woods was really embarrassing for me. And so I'm going to think of a way that I can retell it so that instead of it being about me being a bad warrior, it's actually about my wife being an inconstant woman. And so it's the blame isn't on me for being weak. It's on her for being, you know how us ladies are, just... you throw a handsome bandit in front of us And we're just, you
And-
can't control what we're going to do next. And it is a deeply sexist film, but so are so many films.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
Yeah. Not immune to the times, that is for sure.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Groundbreaking in some ways, not in others.
But I mean, so it's so this other study that is similar in a similar vein as War of the Ghosts that I think about a lot is this. I don't know how you say this first name. It's like Pitchert and Anderson. It might be a Picher. I don't speak French. The 1977 study. We should say the Bartlett studies, like 1932. Like this is classic because this is real
like
classic.
way early than anything
Pre-war.
else.
Yeah. So in this Pitchert and Anderson study, it's this story about two boys who are just like kind of walking. One boy is showing another boy around his home, and you are given instructions. So let's say Alex, that I'm going to read you a little story, and I would like you to listen to this story from the
You're asking a lot right
perspective
now.
of a burglar.
Okay.
Okay, so there's these two boys, and they're walking around a home, and one says, "Oh wow, could we play the stereo?" And the other one says, "Sure. Don't worry, the nearest house is a quarter of a mile away. Nobody can hear anything that happens here." And then they go through the dining room with, silver, china, and cut glass. And so they couldn't play in there. And so it's all of these details. And what they did is they told people to either listen from the perspective of a burglar or listen to from the perspective of a prospective home buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And when you ask people, okay, now recall everything you can about this story. The burglars, what they're recalling is, okay, nobody's going to be able to hear you for miles. And, here's where the china is. And whereas the prospective homebuyers are like, oh, well, he mentioned that there was mold in the basement. And so they're just literally remembering different things based on their goals. And so like, this is an example where you're giving people a really specific goal of what they should be remembering. But we have goals all the time. Like, anything about confirmation bias. If we have a theory of the world, the information that we're going to be paying attention to is the information that confirms our theories. I'm not a social psychologist, but I'm pretty sure there's like even more there in terms of like identity protecting stuff. And so I feel like with Rashomon, it could be it could just be these people that the wife and the samurai and the bandit, they are just literally remembering their version of the story based on the way, the things that they were paying attention to and what they thought their motivations were at the time.
Right. Which is what Heider referred to as, these plausible explanations. And they're all contradictory. There are the only elements that remain the same are like the people and the location.
Right.
But to take it back to the study that you just talked about, when you told me to think about these two boys as a burglar, I immediately thought of Marv and Harry from Home Alone. So everything was painted through that.
Right. You're thinking about like what stairs could those little boys put motor oil on that might make me slip and then fall into a rake, which will set off an iron. I don't remember what happens.
But also think of them like think of them as these two boys as a burglar. I took that literally, and I thought the two boys were the burglars.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I really sent you on a ride there.
Yes. With the homebuyer thing, but that's an interesting time. I have to look that up. I have not heard of that one.
Yeah. Well.
So that's a real knee slapper there. Let's talk about the Rashman Effect.
Yeah.
With Knives Out. So I will say that since Knives Out is a current film, I said it at the top of the show, but if you don't want any spoilers, we will likely spoil it. So pause now, and you can then go watch it and come back and and
It's
finish
so
it,
good.
and
You're
you'll
wasting
just be
your
like,
time
oh
not
my
watching
God,
it."
mind blown. What is the connection here with Knives Out on the Rashman Effect?
Yeah. So whereas you leave Rashomon feeling despairing about how, we can never know anything about the world. And unless we have, incontrovertible physical evidence, we will never be able to solve any case. Knives Out has such a different perspective. Knives Out says, no. The truth is real. The truth is knowable. And we have direct access to the truth throughout the film in a way that felt really daring to me as I was watching it, where like there's a point in the film where it's just like, oh, we're just going to solve this part for you. And you're not even that far into it.
Like 20 minutes in and you already know how he died.
Yeah. And so, and you have, what I think my favorite contrast with Rashomon is that in Rashomon, the truth is so unknowable that every single person's account is fully realized on screen. So you see the wives' account of what happened. You see the samurai's account of what happened, the wife's account of what happened. You see the samurai's account of what happened. And they all look perfectly plausible. You see them play out in front of you. In Knives Out does not treat people's stories this way whatsoever. Knives Out, you have somebody who is being interviewed by the investigators, and they are just the same. You're cutting back between them giving their testimony and these flashbacks of the events that are going on. Right. And whereas in Rashomon, those match up with each other. In Knives Out, you'll hear somebody say something and then they'll flash to the flashback that directly contradicts what they're saying. And so oh, this person's lying. This person is telling a self-serving story.
Yes.
And so there's much more a sense of like, okay, there is a truth that is out there, and that truth is gettable, and through good detective work, you can find it. And even
Blanc.
Yes, that was nice. That was nice.
Thank you.
I feel like the starkest demonstration of like Rian Johnson. Is it Rian Johnson or Rian?
It is Rian Johnson.
Rian Johnson. The starkest demonstration of Rian Johnson's theory of truth, I think, comes with his main character, Marta, who has this condition where she just magically throws up anytime that she lies. And so it really suggests that like there is a truth that is there. Truth is so real that it can cause a physical reaction in someone when it is when a lie is given instead. And
I want to know if this is a real condition.
Oh, it's not a real condition. That is the silliest idea.
I mean,
maybe if you like, there could be you could throw up due to anxiety. And by extension, if you have a lot of anxiety around lying, that is what we should be solving on the Cinema Psych podcast. We are not clinical psychologists.
No. But I liken it to your description here. It's a polygraph. It's an internal polygraph.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have these like two very different like epistemological frameworks for these two directors, where one is very convinced that the truth is unknowable, and the other is letting us know the entire time that there is a truth out there, and we are obviously just like, if you just have Marta say enough possible solutions and then see which one she doesn't throw up after, maybe you could figure out way sooner. And so I think that with Johnson, I think that part of also what he is doing is he is removing some of the ambiguity of Kurosawa, where Johnson, I feel like he is really clearly saying that these characters are lying. I don't think that in Knives Out there's a strong sense that maybe this could be maybe this could be people just filtering the world through their particular viewpoint. It seems much more like these are people who are telling a story that makes them sound good enough to get their inheritance.
Yes, I agree with that one for sure. Because you see their self-serving motivations throughout the movie, and you're just like, wow, these people are actual assholes. With like they don't even know where Marta's from. And they'll just throw out a random country someplace.
Some Spanish speaking, or maybe I think one person said Brazil.
Ransom said Brazil.
Okay.
And it's like, what?
Yeah.
She speaks Spanish. So, I mean, even the character of Ransom, just like, he's got something else going on with him because he's just as bad. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's like an early indicator that don't be fooled by the handsome man in the nice sweater. Something could be. The handsome man in the nice sweater. Yeah. I know what the movie's about. It's about Captain America, right? It's about Captain America, yeah. It's Captain America 4. Yeah, it was a very weird sequel. Yeah, odd. Yeah. I mean, it took it in a completely different direction. Yeah, but, Rian Johnson did that to Star Wars, so Sure, yeah. It's his wheelhouse. Yeah. And so I think, I mean, imagine what a different movie Rashomon would be if instead of seeing the character's testimony play out on screen, we're seeing it transposed next to what actually happened. Yeah. Like how different would your perception of each of the characters be if you could see their lies in real time or their distortions in real time? Yeah, I think especially for the woodcutter, who is the last and to Kurosawa's, the people who follow his film career, and specifically his ideas for this one, if you saw him place the baby down and was like, oh my gosh, I found this baby, then you would like immediately know. And so all the ambiguity of the end would be out the window. You'd be immediately not a fan of this guy, even though he is portrayed through his testimony as the innocent bystander who just happened to catch all of this. Yeah. With no motivations in it whatsoever, but obviously he had some. So it would be a completely different story and would not be winning any awards. I don't know. Maybe let Rian Johnson direct it, I want to see the Rian Johnson remake of Rashomon, where there's a sassy Georgian detective that is interviewing all these people. Yeah. I want to see Benoit Blanc at a seance interrogating a ghost. Oh my god, that would be amazing. Well, they're already doing Knives Out 2. Okay. And it's going to be centered on him. Great. So, perfect. If only. Yeah. So last episode, we started a new segment, called it Your Thoughts, super original, right? Well, for this particular episode, I asked for your thoughts on Rashomon, favorite parts, how might you use it in a classroom setting? And we got a few responses on this one, and I really appreciate all the people who jumped in and shared their thoughts over in, again, the Society for the Teaching of Psychology thread on this. Lynn Bruner thanks for your comments. She says that confidence versus accuracy in eyewitness testimony. So that's really crucial. And also including the impact of trauma on memory. Harry Manley mentioned that our colleagues over at Very Bad Wizards also recently talked about Rashomon. It's worth a listen. I thought it was pretty good. Matt Baldwin discusses Shared Reality, the Echterhoff, Higgins, and Levine 2009 paper about shared realities, and I gotta say the paper's really good. And if I ever throw Rashomon back into my classes, I'm gonna throw in this paper. It's really good. It's really good. And finally, Martin Burgess. Sorry if I mangled your name there. Discussed Kip Williams. Kip Williams, a teacher of social psych, and he taught a social psych and film class. Put that syllabus on the web, and I gotta say, many of us who have used film in our classes have definitely stumbled upon this syllabus. But Martin also says that he has them read Greenwald's The Totalitarian Ego in addition to watching Rashomon. So these are fantastic additions. Now, I didn't ask specifically for Knives Out since it's new. And some people might not have been able to, throw it in their classes. And that's perfectly fine, or not even seen the value in it. But hopefully the comparison between Rashomon and Knives Out helps with that. So that's this episode's segment. Please keep your comments coming. The podcast thrives on the feedback. Again, this year I'm trying to do a little something different every episode. Thanks again for all of the comments, and let's head back to the discussion.
Something that I want to talk to you about, because this is something that I have been thinking so much about lately. And part of it is stuff in the news, and part of it is I work at UCSD now, and I have a colleague who's working on this kind of stuff a lot. So when you think about eyewitness testimony and eyewitness memory, so there's all of this evidence about the imperfections in eyewitness memory. There's so many. Our memories are so error prone. But I feel like it's easy to end up where Kurosawa ended up when you think about this research. It's easy to end up in a place that is eyewitness testimony is irredeemably flawed in a way that it should never be admitted. And I think that it's a really important thing to think about because, especially when we know the types of, we see all of these cases of DNA exonerations where an eyewitness IDs somebody and the eyewitness is not trying. These aren't cases where it's somebody who has a motivated reason to say, I think that it was this guy and not that guy. It's not someone who's trying to frame somebody or save themselves. It's somebody who, often through inappropriate police work was kind of maybe pushed toward a certain reaction or pushed toward identifying a particular person. And then once they've identified that person, it literally changes their memory. And they get reinforced. The police officer says, good. And then they show them another lineup with that person in it. And it's like, oh yeah, it's that guy. I recognize him from the last lineup. And then they go into the courtroom and they say, is the man that you saw do the crime in this room? And they say, oh yeah, it's that guy. Yeah. And not realizing that they have, irrevocably, irredeemably distorted their previous memory. And it's terrifying. And I want to go ahead and take, take a strong stance against imprisoning people wrongly. That's my saucy political opinion for the day.
I agree. I think it's a good hill to die on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome
To
your coalition.
this hill. Yes.
Great.
But that said, I also think that it's important to kind of maintain a perspective that memory is pretty good. It's a similar thing with like perception. You see all this perception research and the way you can't trust your eyes because of these color constancy illusions and these depth illusions and all of these things. And what you think you're seeing is not what you're actually seeing. And it's vision is just actually this useful tool that is an evolved tool. It's, and so you can, there are all of these distortions that you see. Similarly with memory, you see all of these distortions that you can set up in particular lab situations where you can convince somebody of a childhood memory that they don't actually have, 20 or 30% of people, if you kind of really suggest strongly to them that a certain thing happened in their childhood, that's plausible, not a crazy thing. It's not convincing them like, oh yeah. Do you remember that your real dad is John Stamos, but that, there was like a divorce in your family and then this other dad came in and that's the person that raised you? It's like no, I would have remembered John Stamos because he was the guy on television. It's relatively anodyne things where it's like, do you remember a birthday party where there was a clown? And say, oh no, I don't think I remember a birthday party there was a clown. It's like, oh well, actually, because we contacted your parents as a part of this experiment, and they
said a clown almost murdered you, on your birthday.
Again, not the murder part, just that a clown was there. And about 20 or 30% of the participants will then later they'll say, okay, a week later, come back and they'll say, okay, tell me the thing about the birthday party at McDonald's, and they'll say, oh yeah, we were there. There were cupcakes. A clown came out. We had a great time.
You mean Ronald McDonald's?
I'm interpolating. I think it was a McDonald's situation in the in the particular case in the study I'm thinking of. Anyway, but I mean, we know that we can usually count on our memories. We would be lost lambs in the world if we couldn't count on our memories. I would leave my building after this and search, just comb the campus for my car because I would have no idea where I could have possibly come from. And then I would go home and I would have to, meet this guy who cooked me dinner and wonder, you seem nice. I bet we'll get along. There's we know that our memories are mostly reliable. And we also know at the same time that they are distortable. And so this guy at my in my department, John Wickstead, has been kind of leading this crusade lately, where he went back and he looked at these cases where somebody was exonerated. And if you can get the records of what happened when that eyewitness made their initial ID, you can what you find is you find an eyewitness who is not confident in their decision. You find an eyewitness who is saying, I don't know if it's any of these people. And you find police detectives who are saying, we're pretty sure it's one of these people. You got to ID one of them. And so they'll look and they'll say, you know what? Then I guess it was this guy. And then the police detective says, very good. And then they say, oh, good. The police must know something that I don't. So I guess it was this guy. And once you're there, it's off to the races. The memory is completely unreliable at that point. Yeah. Whereas you're much less likely to find this type of error when somebody is highly confident. And so if you gather confidence ratings at the time of an initial identification, you have a much better indicator of the likelihood of a correct identification. And I think that this is it's an important thing to consider because eyewitness testimony is often it's often the only thing that we have in a lot of situations. And, I think treating it as though it's something that has random errors is wrong. It's a thing that can be distorted in particular ways. And once it's distorted, then all bets are off. But if you kind of respect what eyewitness testimony is and what its strengths are and what its weaknesses are, and you use proper police procedures, then you having a lineup administrator that doesn't have any horse in the race. A lineup. You have the detective who's doing the lineup procedure, have no preconceptions about who it could be, so they don't accidentally influence it, and they allow people to say, you know what, I don't think it's any of these people.
Yeah.
And not force a choice, then you can really reduce the likelihood. And I think that the reason that I've been thinking about this so much is because it's very weird to be teaching about how unreliable memory is during this like Me Too moment, where you have, a lot of people talking about like, we really need to believe women. And then to be at the same time teaching like, no. Any memory whatsoever is, might as well just be junk. And so,
I don't want to stomp all over that, but
No, certainly.
I will say that I think there's a difference between just random everyday memories and some of the memories that these women are reported to have because of the trauma associated with them. They get wired in different ways, I think. And I also want to I also want to challenge the random error part in memories, because I think there can be random errors. Yeah, there's a ton of systematic errors, and you can have the whole suggestible and implanting of these erroneous details, the weapons effect, all of these systematic errors. But I think random errors are totally possible, because attention is the lens that our memory is, or at least our declarative memories are seen through, and attention doesn't get everything, right? And so, through no fault of our own, and I would characterize those as random errors.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. And I also want to say that I don't think that. I think that like kind of where we need to end up is somewhere in the middle. That I think
Sure.
it's so critical that we figured out so much stuff about what's bad about memory. And
Yes.
I think that now there's a lot of work to do to figure out, okay, what can we do with this information now? And how can we move forward? What do we do when we have, if an eyewitness comes into the police station, instead of just saying, "Oh, wait, no, thank you, we don't want to hear from you because eyewitness testimony is bad." What are the proper procedures that we can use in order to minimize the chances of these distortions? Respecting memory in that way.
Right. Some of the things that I tell my students when we talk about eyewitness testimony is, I'll say there are 2 suggestions to make them better. One of the really, really, really important, but I think, I'm not a part of any police administration, but one of the really important changes that you can make for lineups is make them sequential and not parallel, which is how most places do them. I don't know now if most places do that, but how we were exposed to, you and I, in media, and then I'm sure everywhere else, they just threw the guys up, just the shot of the usual suspects cover art of all of the guys in the lineup. That's basically how it was. And you're put under the pressure to choose one of those people, and I think the idea was to like have the distinctions among the people, but it turns out that's actually worse.
Right. The distinctions among the people can inflate confidence in a bad way.
Right. Yeah. And so sequential lineups, in addition to what you've already suggested with like the police, like stepping back and allowing the eyewitness to make their informed decision without any influence. And the other thing that I tell them is about a technique called cognitive interviewing, which is mostly is done by behavioral interventionists, and so it would require training on the part of detectives and things, but it's a much better way to get people there. Instead of focusing on the crime or the people, you just have the person in the cognitive interview just remember any details about where they were, what they were doing, so they can place themselves back into that perspective. And then the details of the events will start to come pieced together. And it's a much better way than traditional interrogation techniques like, was it this dude or was it this not, or was it not this dude?
Yeah.
We really
I mean,
need something right now because we don't want to be spending our resources on this person. Tell us now, right?
Right.
It's not great.
Yeah, and I mean, and it comes back to like the cognitive interview stuff. It kind of comes back to these ideas about, our long-term memories are really organized, and so when you can kind of bring up some cue, then it's like, oh gosh, wait, in that room here, here's actually what was happening, rather than just trying to brute force your way in to some accurate recall. John Wickstead disputes the sequential lineup thing. He thinks that it's a relatively small effect compared to some other things. But I don't know how much has been tested there. But
I don't have a horse in that stable.
Sure,
but
there are parts of it that are bad. So like exactly like you said, like that the suspect shouldn't stand out in the lineup. Like if you have it where it's like, there's only one suspect. There's only one person that you actually suspect did it, and it's like the only really tall person that's there, or the only black person that's there. Then it inflates confidence. It's like, oh yeah, he was tall, so it's probably him. And also this one makes me so mad to include only one suspect per lineup. Because what the traditional way to do this is you include the usual suspects. It's like, we think any of these guys could have done it. But if all of the distractors are people, so if there's one guy that you think it probably was, and then there's 5 other people that it's like, well, these guys have done crimes in the area, so maybe it could have been one of them. And then if somebody fingers the wrong guy, then it's like, oh, cool. But whereas if there's only one person that plausibly did it in the lineup, then if somebody says it was one of the other people, then it's like, okay, that's probably an error. And it, instead of creating this thing where it's like, oh, we didn't even realize that guy was in the neighborhood, but he's sure done other crimes, so maybe he did this one.
Yeah, that's I think lineups, I think we can get rid of lineups.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna that's gonna be my adjacent hill to yours.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Let's just get rid of lineups because I don't know if they're helpful.
There's a whole mountain range of good
How
hills.
did you round up all of those people? I mean, seriously. I mean, come on. Who are you trying to fool over here?
Yeah.
Huh? If I witnessed a crime, I don't think I'd want to be within 10 feet of the person who did it. So
sure.
Good luck.
Whoa. We're shaking things up today on the Cinema Psych podcast.
Yeah. Exactly. Anything else that you wanted to say about Knives Out or Rashomon?
I want to talk about Marta, and I want to talk about if you've not seen the film, what I'm about to say is probably the spoilerist thing I could possibly say about the movie. So go ahead and skip ahead a couple of minutes.
I think it's probably the second. Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Okay. It's a super spoilery thing. So,
it's a super spoiler, yeah.
So a very important reveal in the movie is that Marta so she thinks that she has administered a lethal dose of painkiller, I think, to Harlan.
Morphine.
Morphine. And it's this, the worst possible mistake a nurse can make.
'Cause you're an asshole.
And it would have worked. We hadn't have brought you in for questioning, so you could not make your anonymous call, and if Fran had not stashed a safety copy of the tox report, and if Marta had not outplayed you once again by having a kind heart, by saving Fran's life. Though it meant her losing the inheritance and going to jail, she didn't play your game. She saved Fran's life.
Fran's alive?
Oh, yes. Fran. who will confirm this very story, or something close to it, and send you, Hugh, to jail.
That she meant to administer this other medicine that he takes at a much higher dose instead of morphine, which would be administered at a very low dose, but gives him instead this really high dose of morphine. And that's the reason that Harlan responds to kill himself, to slit his own throat in an extremely cinematic crime novelist death. And as is revealed later on, Ransom, the grandson, had actually switched the labels between the two medications. And so the medication that Marta had actually administered to Harlan was the correct medication. Harlan actually wasn't about to die when he killed himself, which is, this awful tragedy that this whole thing could have been avoided. And the thing that Benoit Blanc says about it is that Marta is a very good nurse, and she knew just from the slight difference in viscosity that what she was holding was the correct medicine. And so even though she didn't read the label, she just she could just tell by feel that this was the right medication. And so she has this like automatic and non-declarative knowledge. Which I love so much as a representation of this in film, because you find this kind of stuff with expert knowledge where something that I really love about this is there's all of this research with experts in different domains and how incredible human expertise is. And so there's this work with radiologists who they look at like expert radiologists with 10 or more years of experience versus novices, so like residents, people with basic medical training, but not a lot of on the ground radiology experience, and they will show them X-rays scans for 200 milliseconds. That's almost no time. 200 milliseconds is like one fixation of your eyes on a spot. And the expert radiologists were 70% correct at detecting and naming abnormalities. They're incredibly good at this. Yeah. And so you see this thing now where people are like, well, we should use like machine learning to identify abnormalities, because obviously that'll be better than humans. And the machines just keep not beating good old human expertise. That it seems like probably the best solution as far as like incorporating AI into this process is to use AI not as a replacement for human expertise, but maybe to augment human expertise, to kind of help guide attention a little bit, to say, these are the areas where we suspect there might be an abnormality. So maybe make sure you check those. But you see this thing with Marta where, she is a good nurse. She is an expert in the feel of this medicine. She doesn't need to read the label to know what medicine she's holding. And so it seems so careless at the beginning that like she wouldn't double check to make sure that she's like not holding morphine. Oh my God, how could she make this error? But that actually what she was relying on is something that would typically be a much more reliable indicator. And in fact was a reliable indicator. And so I love that was captured in the film.
And Benny, as the detective calls him, does a very good lead up. So this is a dear listener. You might have recognized that there's not a lot of clips in this. It's just two pals talking because one, the Knives Out just came out, so there's not a lot of clips for me to grab from that, unfortunately. And two, Rashomon's in Japanese. So not super great for an English
for audio,
an English audio program. So, it's just two pals talking.
I could not, as you were just saying this, I could not figure out why it's like, of course you can get audio from Rashomon. It had not occurred to me.
You know
hilarious.
What? Astrid felt the same. And you guys are great. You guys are great.
I have a Ph.D. This is a very good demonstration of what narrow knowledge you need to get a Ph.D.
Yes, it's like a very, very needle tip. Very needle tip. Oh, good stuff. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about with respect to I think both films we could apply this to, although it was specifically used in reference. I'm going to go. I go back to the Your Thoughts segment that you heard earlier in the show. A colleague of ours on the STP Facebook group posted about the Echterhoff. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Echter or Echterhoff paper that came out about a decade ago about shared reality. And Celeste, so I have this for you on the fly.
On the fly.
So they present a new conceptualization of shared reality. So this idea that humans want to create a shared reality, that there is some objectivity to the world. And so they say, based on 4 conditions, they posit A, that shared reality involves a subjectively perceived commonality of individuals' inner states, so not just observable behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
B, that shared reality is about some target referent.
Okay.
So some person. C, that for a shared reality to occur, the commonality of inner states must be appropriately motivated.
Must be
And
appropriately
D.
motivated. Okay.
Yeah. And D, that shared reality involves the experience of a successful connection to other people's inner states.
Okay.
So can you apply that to either film?
Oh, sure. This is an easy one. This is an obvious answers here.
Should have started with one first.
Obviously, my reality and your reality are exactly the same. I think that what we learn is this is great. Like this is the classic. It's the question that was like as interesting of a philosophical question in 2nd grade as it is now, which is like, is my red your red?
Yes.
You know, like that kind of thing.
I was just talking about this in cognitive neuroscience. So yes, my experience your experience?
Exactly. Yeah. And like, I'll have students, want to talk about this kind of thing. And the first time I started getting this question, because I stopped teaching like a typical cognitive course for a few years, and I'm back at it now.
Gotcha.
And so I started getting this question again. And like the first thing that goes through my head is like, oh God, that is such a silly question. Like, is my red your red? Like, what kind of like, nothing inside is that? But then I'm like trying to answer the question. I'm like, oh God, I don't even know what to say here. That like it's this fundamental question of what colors are experience and how what is our access to any type of truth and like do we take the Kurosawa way? And maybe I'm overinterpreting Kurosawa, but what I took from Rashomon is that like because I cannot know if my red is your red, I despair.
Yes.
That like
perfectly captured by just unending rain.
Exactly. That the world is a foggy and unknowable and brutal place. And we cannot rely on other people. Right. Can we? I don't know if the film has a stance on whether we can rely on ourselves or not. Maybe we can rely on ourselves, but we certainly can't rely on others. And we can't rely on reaching any collective agreement on what is true. And there's no prescription whatsoever for how to move forward with that. The film ends in a dark place.
It does.
Yeah. And whereas Knives Out is like, there you were slapping our hands together at the end of that film. Like, yep, we really wrapped that up in a nice little bow. I know literally every detail. Everything fell into perfect place. How nice it is to know the true and unambiguous truth of the world. And I'll see you next time.
Except, and this is the point that I wanted to make with that is that the picture of Harlan at the beginning is a sad, frowny man. But at the end, he's got the color palette changes to lighter. It's brighter. And he has a smile on his face.
I didn't notice
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, go back and look. Ooh,
Yeah.
it's so
What
good.
does it mean?
I think it's just exactly what you were just saying about how we just, tied a nice little bow on it. Happy ending, shared reality for all.
Right?
We're all good.
Yeah. And so I think that when we look at the science, I don't think we need to despair. I don't think that that first reaction that you have, like the first cognitive course that you have, where it's just like, oh my God, my eyes don't work the way I thought they did. My ears don't work the way I thought they did. My memories don't work the way I thought they did. I am biased in the way I solve problems and reason.
Yep.
I don't even know what thoughts are made out of. And so you can kind of leave with this like really nihilistic view of just like nothing is knowable. We are weird, flawed little, fleshy robots with these weird little electrical chunks of meat in our heads, and they are just
floating on a big space rock.
Yeah. Oh my God. Have you even considered? I had forgotten about the space rock of it all.
Yeah.
But I think and I feel like I have to talk my students down sometimes in cognitive classes where, I spend all of this time being like, hey, the intuitive way you thought the world works, or the intuitive way you thought you experienced the world is not actually what's happening. And we can show all of this evidence. But it's also important to notice that it took you being alive for 20 years and me showing you some particular optical illusion for you to even notice that there was something weird about your perceptual system. Like, your perceptual system has gotten you so far. Our cognitive systems are the most useful things that have ever existed, just in terms of like sheer utility. Like, we can do so much with them, and like, they are not perfect, and they're not perfect in weird and counterintuitive ways. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about our shared realities.
Good. I'm glad you settled on that. I'm glad you settled on that, because I agree. We have to. I have to say that we have to. I think it's part of our duty to tell them that their cognitive systems aren't perfect, because I think many people think that their cognitive systems are super good.
Oh, absolutely. We wouldn't have a job if our cognitive systems were perfect.
Yeah, right. So I think that's part of it. But at the end of the day, you do have to say that, even in the face of these flaws, look at what we did. Right? I mean, yeah, there are not great things about what we did, and maybe a lot of not great things that we did. But
if you're gonna think about history, sure.
Well, yeah, right. We gotta get someplace, right?
Yeah.
So think about that, and then think about the dodo, who just ran itself into extinction because it was like, what, a new predator here that I can't deal with, right? Imagine if that was humans.
Oh,
then you can say, what good is our cognition? But until that happens, coronavirus, until that happens.
Yeah, I'm feeling real grave about this right now.
Until that happens, I think we're doing okay.
All
so,
right.
yes, I agree.
It sure is nice
stuff
on our hills, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, it's I can see you from mine. I'm going to set up a tent, though, just in case it rains unendingly on mine.
You got to protect yourself from the deep despair. Yeah, that's good.
Alrighty, I want to thank you, Celeste, for joining me to discuss Rashomon and Knives Out. While saying goodbye, don't forget to say goodbye. Is there anything that you'd like to plug about your life? Where can folks find out more about your work?
My office hours are 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Wednesdays.
That's Pacific time.
So I I mean, I have literally nothing to plug. But
Okay.
One thing, if any cognitive psychology teachers are listening, I created a like very okay cognitive psychology open textbook. One didn't exist, and I aggregated one from a bunch of different places to just like the best chapters I could find on the different things that I needed. It is not super deep in its coverage, but if that is interesting at all to you, you can find it at my website, which is Pilligard, P as in Peter, ILEGARD.ucsd.edu. And there's a teaching tab, and you can find the textbook. And if that's something that's like might be useful to you at all, I would love for you to check it out and give me any feedback that you have about any of the content.
Great. I will. Is there a link to it immediate? Because I can link folks to it.
Yeah, I can link you up.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
I will. You send me that link, and I will link people to it. You know, for anyone listening right now, you have the link already. So that's
for
how this
you in the
works.
future.
Yeah, exactly. For you in the future. Excellent. That's great. And any parting words?
This was just an absolute delight. Thank you so much for having me on the pod.
I am so glad that you did have a good time and came by and said hi. So, listener, one final thought for you while you think about your shared reality. Hey, sharing. This is great segues. Please share and subscribe to the podcast. I'll give you a concrete challenge. Share the podcast with 5 of your friends. This is something that I mentioned a few episodes ago. Share the podcast with 5 of your friends, or just like, everyone on your friend list. That works too. And colleagues, maybe they're not on social media. Whether you listen to all of the episodes or listen to only the films you know, others might want to do the same. Please let them know. The show is fairly unique. I haven't found much like it. So let others know. We appreciate the support. And until next episode, thanks for listening.